Okay, boss. I guess we jumping straight into the deep end and juggernaut. Tell me about it. Like, how did you end up getting started?
So Juggernaut, it was a company that Chad Smith founded in 2009, and I was always a big fan of Chad's. I knew Chad from some of the stuff he had written in Elite FTS years ago, and some other stuff from just local like powerlifting competitions and that kind of thing. And I ended up connecting with him and going down to train there for an event they had. And then he had this gym, and so I was like, oh, I can come down and run it, and kind of made this move to going to working with Chad and getting involved in Juggernaut. That was probably about 2016. I did that, and we just kind of knew each other, mutually. Was a very, very intelligent guy, a coach, you know, sort of educator. And then he ended up working for Chad later on. And so we kind of knew each other through this guy, James. And then, the kind of the rest is history once I went down there and started working, under Chad, doing all that stuff and getting into the remote coaching, getting into he brought a lot of really good talent online with us and brought a lot of people into the Juggernaut teams, and then I worked with them. And so it was one of those opportunities where like I wanted to try and do stuff. I was working in our gym in Oakland, which is about 6.5 hours from Orange County, and I was working there like 10 hours a day, morning and night, all day, coaching every single person that came in the door. When I wasn't there, if I was gone for a morning or something, had a doctor's appointment or something, like no one would show up to train. And so I just became this like magnet where like I was the only reason people were coming to the gym. If I didn't show up, or if I wasn't going to be there, no one would come. And so it was just like it wasn't like a bad place, but it was a bad business. It was a bad way to run a business. You're stuck in this place where one person becomes the icon and all the work is hinging on me, and so that just wasn't going to work. And so I was eager to get out of that situation. And, the stuff with Juggernaut really afforded me that option to like try and branch out and do something different and, position myself to be better off, to, make more money, to free up time to do things differently. Um, and so, I had to kind of jump on that and go that route.
Mm. Yeah, it's definitely tough, isn't it? Because you do want to be in person and see people, but at the same time, like, there's only 24 hours in a day, and you need to give some of those
Yeah.
hours to you. Oh man, I'm sure like every coach you would have just listened to exactly what you said has literally just face planted and been like, "Yep, I've been there. I've done those 10-hour days and split shifts and not been able to train yourself and all that kind of crazy nonsense." Like,
Yeah.
what is the difficulties you faced um going online from being in person? Like, do you prefer it?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. Like it's different. It's different, and I think it kind of comes down to there's major benefits online and there's major benefits in person, and they're not necessarily the same thing. So like one of the biggest difficulties is you have to change the way you do stuff,
Yeah.
and I know a lot of coaches still do this kind of thing where they might write the program the day of. Someone comes to the gym and they sort of like spit out something like, "Yeah, we're going to do this today." Maybe they don't have a long-term plan. Maybe they don't have any kind of plan or structure to the design of their training. Um, and you know, sure, you can kind of wing it and coach your way through the day, day to day, and that works. It works. The less important the results are, the better that works. um,
Yeah.
but online, like remotely, you have to have a much better picture of your plan and much better, like, hey, what are we doing today, tomorrow, the next day? And so, going online for me forced me to think more critically about the principles I use to train and how those different components need to be assembled to get, a good training program. It exists in person as well, but there's no way to sort of, you know, fudge your way through it. You have to have it written down and present it. And the other thing that I think actually makes remote coaching a little bit better than the in-person coaching is that you're generally seeing video of every lift, so you have a chance to do a more thorough analysis kind of right away. You can play it a couple of times back and forth. It gives you a chance to dial in on something that you might not do in person. You might watch somebody in person and make a comment or make an adjustment or something, and then that's that. But when you do it with video every time, you have a much better chance to watch it 2 or 3 times and make some better get some better assessments. And then the other big thing I think that makes a huge difference with remote coaching is just you have access to people, a lot more people that you wouldn't necessarily have access to. If you coach in person, you're limited to what people that are local to you. And so for myself living in the Bay Area, it's not cheap to live here. It's it's very expensive, and so you don't have a lot of a lot of younger athletes here. You don't have a lot of people here that are able to be weightlifters because I think like a studio apartment here probably costs you $2,000 a month. And so it's like it's not, yeah, it's like you're not going to get that young sort of person floating through like their early 20s or whatever, kind of trying to figure out what they want to do, and being able to survive off of a regular sort of minimum wage job or whatever. So the remote stuff has opened up people all over the country, people in different places where you have access to people that are not necessarily in they wouldn't be able to live out here. And then obviously the negatives, obviously like in person you have instant feedback. You can give feedback that adjusts and corrects, and you can give cues right before people lift, and it's just going to be better overall technical cueing and coaching. But one of the downsides to that is that and this is something that happened to me when I was in the gym all day, is you can overdo it, and you can be in a place where you're basically handicapping your athletes because you're doing all the thinking for them, and you're telling them every single cue every single time. They're waiting for your instruction before they execute anything, and then it just becomes this like paralysis by analysis thing where they're incapable of figuring out what's right and wrong with their own lifting, and so they get stuck waiting for someone to hold their hand. So there's major trade-offs both ways, but it just kind of comes down to how what suits your personality better, and what you kind of like and what you prefer.
Sure, I totally agree on that. The whole biofeedback and being able to allow athletes to figure it out on themselves. Like, obviously, you're not going to be like a complete novice or a beginner. You can be like, oh, figure that out. But there's going to be aspects where
Mm-hmm.
they'll look at you and be like, oh, what do I do now, Max? And you're just like, well, how does it feel?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, it kind of feels this way. I was like, well, figure it out, you know?
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
it definitely is like an aspect of coaching that I don't know. I think it's been left by the wayside for a while. People are
Mm,
getting into that place where it's like, oh my God, like I need to give them like this cue, that cue, this cue, tactile, verbal,
yeah.
whatever, kinesthetic, and you have to just throw a million one things at people, and then it's just like a cat in headlights, and they don't know where to go, right? And it's just, hey, there's always another day. Allow them to figure some stuff out. Come back to them at a later date, and
Yeah.
things always seem to work out.
Yeah, exactly. For sure. It's one of those things hard to it's there's an obsession, as every coach starts out at a certain point, and there's this kind of like progression you go through. You know, New coaches are looking for, what's the right exercise? What's the perfect cue? What are all the things that, like, these little things they can collect and do and use? And as you get older and more mature as a coach and more experienced, you start to realize like those are less important than you thought they were. And it's more about like, how do I manage the system? How do I manage the training? And then as you get older even more, you start to realize it's about finding the right kind of person with the right mentality, the right mindset. And so you start to realize, like, over time, like, so much more of the things you thought were super important as a brand new coach really aren't as important as you think. Saying the perfect phrasing of a word or a statement, about how to do something with your body is not the thing that's going to separate you from taking, from being a nobody as a weightlifter to, Olympic champion. There's much more to it. So a lot of it comes down to the person themselves, right?
Mm.
But it's funny because you see that all the time with new coaches. It's like this obsession with they go too far down that road of like, how do I get the best possible cues, or what's the intricate secrets that exist that I can discover, and they don't exist. There's nothing like that.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the movements stay the same, right? Like, a
Yeah.
snatch is a snatch, a deadlift is a deadlift, and all that type of it doesn't change. We can teach the movement, but we coach the individual, and the individuals are where the complexity lies. I think one of the something that really stuck with me. I watched a coaching documentary on Netflix, maybe a couple months ago, right? And it was Jose Mourinho. Do
Mm-hmm.
you know who he is? Football manager or a soccer manager
Mm-hmm.
for you guys. Anyway, he's a soccer manager, right? And he turns around to his team and just being like, "I don't make you better football players. I make you a better team." And basically, it
Mm-hmm.
dives into the whole coaching of like he, coaches how to be a team. The same thing with us. We coach how to be an athlete. We coach the individual rather than, oh no, this cue
Yeah.
needs to be dialed in and I need their toes out like
Yeah.
with the degree. I'm like, well, if up here's not working, it doesn't necessarily matter about all the minutia.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah.
But that's the
It's it.
that's the hard thing to learn, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like seeing the forest from the trees, right? It's like the
Mm,
ability to kind of take a step back. And I think as you get better at coaching, you start to see those bigger picture things, right? And it's like you start to look at things less from a day-to-day standpoint or a lift to lift. And, you know, you start seeing it much more as what's the long-term journey here? And, it's funny because when you're young, you don't realize how quickly the time's going to go by, and how absolutely ridiculously short, 4 years is. It's instant, it's gone. It comes and goes right away. And you know, training somebody for a quad or for Olympics, or training somebody for national championships or whatever, like if you're only focused on the next 6 months, 6 weeks even, you don't have the mindset to like, hey, what I do today is going to influence what happens to me in 6 weeks, and that influences what happens to me in 12 and 24 weeks, and so on. And so it's like, every day is training for that mark 4 years down the road. And it's hard to grasp that, like, you're putting together your results, at the end of your career today,
mm.
right? When you finally walk away from the sport and you look back on the numbers you did, those numbers were impacted by every action you took, 5 years prior. It's hard to get when you're young, when you're kind of new, or you don't realize like, oh, I've got another training cycle, or I can bump things up next time, or whatever, or whatever thing there is, right? Like, that's that's tough to get that kind of mentality. And as a coach, you get older, you start to realize how much more impactful those things are. It's like, okay, today is really important because it does influence what happens the next time, later on down the road.
Mm. And we live in an instantaneous world now, right? So it's like they want to
Yeah.
snap the fingers and they're already on the platform. You're like, wait, hold on,
Yeah.
you've not earned the right, You've got to earn
Yeah.
the right
Yeah.
to lift that weight. And especially like if we blanket statement the whole fitness industry, which is really hard to do because it's so broad, but say
Yeah.
for argument's sake, we'll do that. Like, look at the programs that are sold. It's like, or sold, I should say, is where they turn around and go, oh, 6 weeks. Yeah, you'll get your goal in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
4 weeks,
Yeah.
8 weeks, 12 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever. It's never like, oh, you'll get your goal in 3 years.
Yeah.
You'd be like, wait, hold on a minute. 3 years?
Yeah. It's tough too, because I mean, you look at all those different things that exist. You've got, like the diet stuff is crazy. I mean, it's you can talk for hours on the fitness industry and its pitfalls, but like the diet stuff is funny because you get like so much of it is marketed in this like quick fix kind of thing, right?
Mm,
It's like, okay, 6 weeks to lose X amount of pounds or whatever. That's like, it's amazing that like for one, it's amazing that people still would believe any of that, right? Like that, it's like clearly not going to happen. But it's also like one of those things, like you're saying, it's just like this fast, like get the results right away, right now, because it's not about it's not about setting up a plan and executing that plan and having it work out the way you want. It's about getting, exactly what you want this minute, right? Which just happens to be whatever the flavor of the month is, right? Losing weight or, whatever, getting strong or, any number of different things.
But I mean, it's the whole age old sentence, right? If it comes quickly, it goes quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that to me is just common
Exactly.
sense. Like if you pick it up real easy, you can also forget it and drop it real easy. And it's really hard to get people to buy into the process. Like I don't know the secret to get people to buy in. I think it changes from person to person because obviously everyone's different. But what have you seen over the years of trying to get people to buy in different ways? And do you think it's down to them 100% and be like, hey, look, this is what it is. If you don't buy in, there's the door. Or or do you kind of go the other way and you're just like, right, how can we do this? How can we change things to get them to keep coming back?
It really depends. Like you got to imagine that there's different levels of athletes coming to you. There's people that are dedicated that would do anything you told them. They wouldn't question it. They just go ahead and do it. They wouldn't even ask. They just, and then you get people that are, are talented or whatever that come in and they're unsure of what, how to go about doing it. And so they need more direction. And then there's people you come in, that are like the opposite, that are like, basically need to be motivated. And so it's like you're getting someone to buy in, I think stems from, first finding out why people are doing something. People come to you, they want to be a weightlifter or a powerlifter or something. You got to find out what it is that means. Like, what's the significance of doing this? Are you just doing it because like you think you should do it, or are you doing it because, it's like this, whatever your friend is doing it, or your dad did it, or there's something you're trying to prove, or is it you're doing it because you're talented and like you want to see what you can achieve? And so it all stems, like getting people to buy in stems from like finding out what it is that brought them there in the first place, and then keeping people around, keeping people to sticking with it is there's obviously like building a rapport and a relationship with your athletes, making sure that you actually invest in who they are as people. I think it's very easy for people to look at athletes as like a ticket to something different, a ticket to the top or whatever. Like if this person's good and I can attach to them and kind of use them to sell my stuff or whatever, then yeah, that that's gonna that's gonna wear out pretty quick. So it's like you're getting invested in what they want to do as a person and finding that out, and then you both are on the same page about it. So it's like it just depends. I mean, it's always going to be individual. Each person is coming to the table with something else. I think it's kind of a thing too. Now you see more where people, something you didn't see a while back was that people like see this as an avenue to, like, I don't want to say like Instagram fame, but like they see it as an avenue to like become recognized. Like it's more important that they're recognized than that they are good at something. And that's a weird type of personality, a weird thing to deal with, because to me, why would you do weightlifting or powerlifting if your only goal is to be recognized for it, but you don't really care if you're good at it, or I mean, you probably do to some degree, but only so much as like it's gonna further this like, keeping up with the Joneses mentality of like, oh, so and so is popular, I can be popular, so I'm gonna do this and chase after that.
It's
So
that whole
it's
like
a
intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation though, right? And like extrinsic is great. It can get people to do shit and it works clearly,
sure.
but at the same time, like it will fleet away eventually. And people will stand the test of time when they have the intrinsic motivation, and they're the people that will end up continuing on rather than keeping up with the Joneses, and then that trend changes and now it's like, oh, Now people who are, you know, like you said, quote unquote, Instagram famous, I don't know, like thick skin lean and, you know, running ultra marathons or whatever. And the next thing you know, they've dropped off the program and they're doing a shitload of running. You're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it's definitely. I think it's one of the greatest things about coaching, right? And having those hard conversations of just being like, well, what is the actual reason? And you kind of learn who they are as an individual, and you can kind of, you know, tailor the program. I mean, at the end of the day, a squat is a squat, you know, percentages are the same, all that type of shit is exactly the same, but you learn the individual, and it puts a little bit more heart behind the program. And I think that's the beauty in our job, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's, you know, I mean, ultimately all this comes down to like, you want to help people and see them succeed, right? And so like that's got to be your fundamental motivation for all that.
Totally. So how did you get into the whole strength training world?
I started when I was young. I mean, I started, you know, weightlifting when I was about, you know, 12 years old or so. I saw it on TV in the Olympics, and I was just like, without a doubt, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Like, I'm going to be a weightlifter. And, you know, it was, you know, set in stone after that. I started training, you know, when I was a little bit older, and found coaches that, you know, lived in the area that, in Montana, and started training with them. And then eventually I got injured, you know, later on. I couldn't do the lifts anymore. So I became a coach. And, you know, it almost kind of started where like I became a coach sort of out of like necessity. Like I had to keep paying the bills and stuff. And so it was like, well, I'll just be coach. And it's always kind of been this thing of like, you know, I always viewed myself as an athlete, as like a lifter, and I'm going to get back to lifting someday. I'm going to, you know, heal up my injury. But that never happened. I did some powerlifting for a bit, but at some point, you know, in the last, yeah, I'd say like, you know, 8 years or so, that all changed. And it was like, okay, like I'm a coach now, and like you're focused on being a coach. Like your lifting is kind of done. And so it's easier to see yourself as a coach, not as an athlete anymore. And then that changes your perspective on it, you know.
Yeah, it
Kind
does,
of bought
man.
into the idea of being a coach. Yeah.
It's funny how like the initial injury sets in, right? And your mind is still in that athlete zone. You're like, no, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Like I'll be able to come back type shit. And then whether it's a couple of weeks later or a couple of years later or whatever, you start to realize, I'm probably better as a coach now rather than trying to keep pursuing and breaking down all the time. Yeah, it's funny, that realization. You see it in sport all the time.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Right. It's it's definitely like it's one of those things where you're just like you're the mindset's so different. You know, as an athlete, it's like you can push yourself to do things and you have control over all of it. As a coach, it's like sometimes you feel like you had no control because of the athlete, but like, you know, it's like you just want to get in there and like grab the bar and do it yourself, you know?
yeah.
So it's like a totally different mindset. You know, you have this like to step back and like, how can I get this person to do that thing?
Yeah, it's from like serving yourself to serving others, right? It's
Yeah.
literally polar opposite, and you have to like take yourself out of your own mind and put yourself as like a fly on the wall, so you can see everything, or put yourself in someone else's mind, which is fucking difficult.
Yeah, it's for sure like a totally different change in mentality and approach.
Hmm. What injuries was it? What did you do?
I dislocated the lunate bone in my left arm, my left
Mm.
hand. So I jammed my wrist against my knee, my thigh, and a clean, and the bone was dislocated. And then it took, you know, long story short, it took way too long to get the surgery. It was like 13 months before the bone was put back in place, and so it went necrotic, and that was it. The whole wrist is messed up, and so I can't do a clean or a jerk. I mean, I could do it. Right now it would be very painful, but I can't do a snatch or a jerk or a clean. So I could do like some bench pressing because I can hold my wrist, in a rigid position, but yeah, can't do much else.
Is it when
So
the wrist is
that.
flexed?
Yeah, so like the wrist, like in this position, it would hurt to have any pressure on it.
Yeah.
But if I'm bench pressing, the pressure's all axially, it's just straight down here. And then, it like doesn't quite bend the same way as the other wrist. So,
Damn.
yeah. Yeah, it is what it is. I mean, looking back on it now, it's like, I wouldn't have been as good as I wanted to be. I want to believe I would have been a lot better than I was. And I think had I kept going as right at the beginning of starting to grasp things as a lifter and really learn things, but I wouldn't have been to the level I would have hoped to have been. So, I'm going to talk about this with my wife a lot. Like, had I not gotten hurt, I probably would never have been a coach as much as I was. And I probably never would have been been to any of these places I went and, coached people I coached and learned so much and done things. So it's like, good or bad, like it is what it is. And, I made the best I could out of the situations and then, found all this other success as a coach instead of an athlete, So it's like, it's hard to be like remorseful or regretful about it and be like, oh man, I wish I would have not gotten hurt. I would have been this or that. But, I did other things. And so, had I not gotten hurt, I never would have done those things.
It's crazy how like one door closes and another one opens, right? Like it's something that we could never even imagine.
Yeah.
And you end up getting into that opportunity and all that situation. You're just like, what the fuck happened? Like, how did I get here? Sort of thing. But yeah, like you said, like you would never have had that opportunity to coach people that you've coached or still coach or go to the places that you've been to, like basically just get around, you know what I mean? And live life while doing something that you enjoy doing is crazy.
Yeah, exactly. I would have never started the gym. I would have never, I mean, all the American records and world records and stuff we'd broken, like I never would have done any of that,
How many so far?
We've had 4 people break American records in weightlifting. I've had a couple of people break world records in powerlifting. I've had one lady broke IPF squat record and total record. And then another lady broke the all-time world record squat, bench, and squat and deadlift, and then total.
Wow.
And then, a bunch of national champions and stuff. And like, it's been great. I mean, we've done a lot of different things and it's been cool because it's given me exposure to do stuff, where it's like, I mean, you can coach people and make a living at it, which is something that when I started weightlifting, I mean, that was not even a thing. Like you just assumed you were going to, if you're going to be a weightlifter, you have some kind of job, and like weightlifting is a hobby your whole life. And the fact that like you could make a life out of it, and then the fact that you can make a pretty decent life out of it is amazing to me. And so I'm like forever grateful for that, the fact that still is something that's possible. Yeah,
it's crazy, right? Like how we all get into lifting, right? We get into it for many different reasons, whether it's athlete or a hobby, right? And we never think we're going to make money out of it. It's just like, hey, this keeps me sane. Yeah. This is just what I enjoy doing, The next thing was, oh, hey, can you coach that? I was like, yeah, you can coach that, no problem. It's like, oh, how much? You're like, what do you mean, how much? Like, you going to pay me? It's like, nah, this is just like a hobby, right? And then it kind of snowballs from there. Yeah,
exactly.
It is really cool.
When I started, my coach never charged us anything. He never made us pay. And so I remember like coaching people and like, people would, like in the very beginning have a client that'd pay and like they'd pay a certain amount of money. And I was always like, well, okay. I mean, like I can't believe someone would pay for this. It's crazy, It's just a totally different world. But now it's normal. I mean, that's regular. I mean, it's normal in every sport, I mean, 50 years ago, like you pay to get coached in a sport. I mean, it's not like ridiculous, or 30 years ago, but like, gymnastics, like you pay for gymnastics, you pay for your kids to do that stuff. Like it's not unreasonable. I think we were just in weightlifting and powerlifting. We were so far behind. It seemed like a weird thing. Why would anyone do that? It's like a hobby. Like, why would someone pay you to coach them? And, And now it's like totally normal and expected. And, I always say it's too, like, I always have this fear because I came from a time when there was no money in the sports. And so my whole perception foundation is based on the fact, like, this idea that like it's all going to fall apart one day, it's all going to disappear, and no one's going to do this stuff anymore, and there's no, it's like you're going to be whatever, destitute, living on the street or whatever. But I always remember, like, the expression, the canary in a coal mine, right? Like, so like I always think, like, when I see coaches online that are, they're not real good. They're not good coaches. They're not coaches. They're just people that are in there to make a buck, and they're full of shit, or their stuff's not good. Like, it always reminds me, like, okay, I'm glad that they're there, because as long as they're there, that's the canary in the coal mine. That means that we're safe. That means that, like, if somebody can get by with total trash and there's people willing to pay for it and there's something going on, that means that the market is big enough to support that the market is there and there's people paying for these really, like, not well known, not recognized, not good coaches. Then you're good. As soon as that stuff disappears and you start seeing less and less the other better lifters, people are kind of disappearing, good coaches are kind of not in it anymore, that's when you got to worry, I guess. But yeah, it's like, it's always this, like, sort of like, people get angry when they see those, like, these people, like, kind of shilling their crap, and then you realize, like, no, it's a good thing. Like, you want that, because that means that there's a lot of demand. That means that there's people out there ready to sign up and train, and people want to do this.
It's a really interesting perspective, and it is true, because it does show that there is enough demand in this industry, right? People are still willing to put the money where their mouth is, even if you are squatting with a kettlebell on a Bosu ball.
Yeah,
You're just like,
well, yeah, because it means, like, yeah, because too, it's like people are inexperienced, right? That if there's people that are inexperienced, they're new, and if people are new, that means there's people starting to discover it. And if there's new discovery, the market's growing. There's people coming in, right? If everyone was discerning and there was only good coaches getting jobs, getting paid, it means your market's shrinking. So
I always think of weightlifting as, like, you've got the elders, right? And they're the wise ones that have been doing it for, like, since God was a lad, that type of stuff. And they're, like, trying to pass it on. It's like, here you go, younglings. Like, this is a barbell, this is a snatch, clean and jerk, blah, blah, blah. And it's like just passing on the knowledge that way. I always think of it as that, weird. It's not even written on script yet. It's like a language people don't understand. Yeah, it's like passed down.
I feel like there's a lot of that. Like, the old school guys, kind of like, that's how it used to be. They'd pass on the training that way. It's gotten a lot better now, because there's a ton more information. There's a ton more educational material and stuff like that. And there's way more of that good stuff. Like when I started, like, no one really had, like, a standardized way of teaching someone how to do a snatch or a clean and jerk. There wasn't like a manual that explained it in a universal way. It was, like, very vague, and sort of like they give you, like, a bunch of pictures and instruction, and you kind of do it. And so it wasn't, like, broken down in a simple way where you could get a lot of people to learn quickly. And now, I mean, you could find a complete instructional, complete, simple, easy to follow instructional, like, piece on Instagram, and you can fit it into a 60-second video. And so it's like, it's come so far from where everyone was, 20 years ago.
It's also really, really cool to see, though. Like, instead of, like, trying to dissect and, go to the World Library and find this old dusty book, with the title of Olympic weightlifting, you're like, oh, what is this? And then you've got to read the whole thing, which is 1,000 pages long, and understand it. It's like, like, you got those. Yeah, granted, it's not going to be the greatest of things if it's in 60 seconds. But at the same time, it's a bit more accessible for other people. And something that really fires me up is seeing youths be, have the opportunity to sort of mess around with weightlifting. And I think that's awesome. I think that's something that you guys over there in the States are doing really, really well with sport development and then also youth development. Like, take out the performance side, just put in, like, we're developing like more robust human beings.
Yeah,
with
for sure.
Olympic weightlifting in the academies and in high schools.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of, I mean, it's pretty cool to see, like, there's some pretty impressive youth programs in the Bay Area here. There's a great club called Hassle Free, and they have 300 members, 300
Wow.
kids, and they're not all trained at the same time, but like, they have like weightlifting in the school as gym class. And so
Wow.
these kids go to gym class, and it's run by the weightlifting coach, and he runs them through snatch and clean and jerk, and squats and presses and all that, and that's what they do. And then they probably have some like running and stuff in there too, but like, that's awesome to think that like you grow up in a place and learn to do that stuff in gym class or whatever. That's like, man, I would have died to have that opportunity.
Mm.
But it's cool. Like, I mean, it's cool to see that stuff happening. I think with the whole CrossFit community being so big, and now a lot of those people, their kids getting into it, I think is really cool to see. Like, to see CrossFit, like, generation, like another generation of people that came up where their parents were CrossFitters, and now these kids are in it and they're going to do weightlifting and see it, and it's just awesome. And fitness has exploded here in a good way the last 20 years.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think they've done a fucking fantastic job. CrossFit as a brand of being able to just like explode the whole strength and conditioning, take away the mirrors, focus on the community, the movements, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
Like, I think they've done a really good job, and it's only fueled more people to go down the weightlifting route, the gymnastics route. Actually go and speak to gymnast coach or weightlifting coaches, rather than be like, oh no, I'm a personal trainer, I can coach you Olympic weightlifting, and you're just there like, oh fuck,
Yeah.
like you're gonna tear your labrum type shit. It's like, no, now we're gonna go to these specialists and actually go learn about these different things, and it's kind of like this melting pot of fitness, right? Which just fires me up, because I'm just like, oh, there's so much to learn. And like, with 100 lifetimes, we'll never learn it all. So it's really cool, because there's always something else that we can do. Bar running though, we don't run. That's weird. Hell no.
Yeah, I never liked running.
Hell no. No, I really wish. My school had like a gym. We had a leisure center for my high school, but it was like machines. There was a Smith machine. There was no squat rack. The plates they weren't bumper plates, but they were like the shitty rubber plates. Like a techno gym or some shit like that. It was like,
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe 30 meters squared. Like, it was absolutely tiny. I think the dumbbells only went up to like 30 kilos or 28 kilos or something like that. It was something.
Oh, wow.
Okay. But it was not the best. But I couldn't imagine what athletes could have come out of that school if they would have had the opportunity.
Yeah. It's it's crazy here, because America's so big. The US is so big. There's so many different areas. And I've been seeing high schools in Southern California that have their own weightlifting, like their own strength and conditioning departments and coaches, and then you look at other parts of the country, and like there's weight rooms and that are ridiculous in these high schools. There's huge places that have just incredible money devoted to sports and stuff. And then obviously there's other places with nothing, there's nothing like that. So it's cool to see like those things that are positive. And it's cool to see that stuff coming around. We always talk, the thing in weightlifting culture here amongst the coaches for as long as I can remember, they were always talking about like, what if we get, if we could get weightlifting to be a high school sport where it was contested in high school, we would win the Olympics every time. We would dominate, because you'd find those talented athletes that were, in high school that, could be, professional football players, but aren't good enough at football, too short, whatever, not coordinated enough, not, fast enough, but they're like 90% there. They'd make amazing weightlifters. There are just incredible talents in the U.S. that are just absolute freaks of nature that just aren't, they don't do anything athletically after school, after high school or college, because they're not good enough to get to the pros, and there's nothing else for them. So that was always one of those things we talk about. Like if you could just get weightlifting in high school as a high school sport nationwide, you'd instantly have millions of weightlifters, and then you'd have this talent pool that was massive, and you could turn that into something. So.
And then you get more funding back,
Has,
right? Because
yeah.
of the participation would go up, and
Yeah.
you would inevitably
Yeah,
start
for
winning
sure.
more medals and that stuff.
Yeah,
man.
and
I remember. Sorry, go on, man.
No, you're good.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I remember kids in my school, right? Like it was a state school, just a random school, northwest of England, not the greatest, not the worst, and kids were running like 10 summit 100 meters.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait, what? 10 summit in like Converse, don't train, smoking weed all day, that type of shit, and then ends up doing nothing with it. You're like, wait, you could have turned your hand to any sport and gone pro.
Yeah. It's amazing. I mean, there's tons of that talent, it's just tapping into it. So
I'm really big on equal opportunity, right? Like super big on equal opportunity. Like something that is one of my pet peeves in the entire world is like a pay to play society. So it's like, you're born into a family that, is working class or lower middle class or whatever, just gets by pennies wise, or you're not going to get that opportunity. And it's like, wait, that kid's had no say, you know what I mean? And now you pair an equal opportunity or the same opportunity for those kids as the quote unquote richer kids. And they've got the work ethic and the drive of, well, I don't have anything else. Like I either sleep in my car or do whatever. I go home and it's like, I'm not going to have like the greatest of times at home, a broken home, orphan, whatever the fuck it is. You pair that work ethic with, hey, we're actually going to give you the opportunity and we're going to coach you and we're going to give you a mentor and a role model, right? They no longer are on the streets, or hopefully not as much. They're no longer messing around with the likes of wrong types of people, and the talent you would end up producing would be next level.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Yeah, it's that's what you're looking for, right? I mean, again, it's kind of funny because it kind of comes down, like all this kind of comes full circle back to like coaching, and like there's very different approaches to what you do in the industry. I mean, some people, like I said, the Kevin Doherty over in San Francisco, he has this big club in the high school, and that's his thing. He's good at bringing lots of kids in and finding talent and pushing them forward. But he's not like the detail, like every day in the gym with one person kind of coach. And then there's other kinds of coaches that work great with like mid-level athletes and does an awesome job there. Some people work great with like one or two athletes. Some work great with 100. So there's like a lot of different ways you can go about being a coach and doing those things and being successful in there. It doesn't have to look exactly the same as somebody else. Someone might be like a super analytical type and have like a whole bunch of data and information. Other people might be, more, old school, sort of shoot from the hip, bring people together and make the energy, really, exciting. So it's like very different types of people and personalities and stuff come together.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like as much as it is, you've got to adapt for the individual in front of you. You also need to adapt how you coach for yourself, right? You can't like wear someone else's fucking mask and expect to be good. You got to allow your own personality to come out a little bit. Which in fairness, I've seen a lot of coaches suppressed, like just around the world, having the opportunity to coach in some places around the world. And it's just been like, oh, okay. Like I can see you would be absolutely fantastic. However, you're not letting your true self shine. And, people can pick up on it.
Yeah, for sure. It's also like, you, as a coach, like you want to decide, it's like the people that will like your personality will gravitate to you. right? You're not gonna fake it for long. If you're a dishonest person, or you lie to everybody about stuff like that, sort stuff out quickly. If you're a really energetic, ambitious coach, you're not detail oriented, like you're gonna get people that are like that. You don't expect to get sort of detail oriented, hardworking, like, quiet person. They're not going to feel comfortable doing that. So coaches' personalities are always going to be reflected in the program and the system and the training and the gym and all the stuff that they do. And athletes gravitate to that, depending on who it is or what it is.
There's coaches for athletes and athletes for coaches, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If there's anything we can put our money on, is people being people, and like sometimes you're gonna get on with people, and then the next thing you're not gonna get on with people. And it's like, look,
yeah, for sure,
have the respect to shake hands and be like, hey, like I think Max is probably a better fit for you than me. He probably swears less and shouts a little less too. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, for sure. It's hard to learn that though.
Yeah.
Like, it's
for sure.
I think everyone needs a mentor, like everyone should have the opportunity to, one, be the teacher, and then two, be the student at the same time, because everyone's got a story to tell and everyone's got their own experiences. But at the same time, you don't know what you don't know. So talk for a time and then also listen for a time. It's hard especially when you're starting out, right? Because you don't know who your mentor is. You don't have any people to help you in the industry. You're just trying to get things moving. So it's hard to try and find a diamond in the rough.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just the nature of it, right? Like, you've got, everyone's different, and it's like half the problems in this stuff are half the shit is sorting out just the different personalities.
Hell yeah, mate. Hell yeah. Some clash, some don't.
Yeah, that's true. And the other thing too is like, I think, as you get older as a coach, you start to realize how much more personality matters and character and the people than some of the other little stuff, Sorry about that.
Yes.
So it's like, you can tell for sure, like finding a person who clicks with you is so much more important than finding the most talented person. You're going to get so much more out of the person than if they're just purely, some super talented type.
I also think, to get into the whole coaching scene, you need to learn a little bit of, one, psychology, and two, like sociology. Actually dive into all these different things. It's funny, right? Because we want to get in the industry, the fitness industry. You obviously learn about the body. Okay, cool. You want to start coaching, we'll say weightlifting. Okay, well, obviously you need to know about weightlifting. You need to know the movements, programming, etc., etc. You're like, oh, okay, cool. I've got that ticked. And you're like, oh, now you're going to deal with the most complex animal on the planet. It's like, oh, what's that? It's like, it's a fucking human being. So if you don't know how to, one, communicate, and two, like actually like figure out, what they're trying to tell you, how they're acting, blah, 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 you're screwed, man.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree. It's like people skills and the ability to read people and, figure out what's going on. Like, that's it. 99% of it.
Yeah,
there's a lot of coaches out there that are freaking terrible at that too. It's surprising.
And it's funny because a lot of coaches that are shit at it do well.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I was gonna say too, like, it's one of those things where, like, that's the kind of stuff that you learn the hard way, right? As a new coach, you learn quickly that, like, if you're a person that doesn't have good people skills, like, it starts to show up pretty quickly that, like, people don't come to you, people aren't working with you, people are leaving. Like, you start to learn pretty quick that your skills as a people person are not up to par. It's, you can figure it out right away, and then you got to work on it. But it's funny that, like, I mean, you see a lot too. A lot of coaches have this thing, like, where there's a lot of people blaming everyone else, right? Oh, this guy quit, he doesn't like to work hard, or this person left because she doesn't, want to do this, or she's lazy, or it's never, those coaches that don't change, that don't see it as like, hey, I gotta figure out, what's going on. It's not always their fault. It's not always someone else's fault. It's usually my own. They're the ones that are going to excel at that.
You have to play many different roles, right? You have to be able to adapt the package that you want to give to the individual. You're just like, okay, and that's the only reason, the only way you're going to be able to do that is to be able to decipher their personality type and be able to figure out how their week's been, their day's been. Yeah, granted, there's ways of it.
Yeah.
How's your day been? How's your week been? But
Yeah.
there's going to be shit that they're not telling you, right?
Yeah.
Maybe someone in their family is just diagnosed with cancer or some shit. Yeah, they're not going to be in the greatest of spaces.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to try and figure that out.
Yeah, it's learning to read between the lines,
Yeah, it's most important part about coaching, I reckon, is being able to read between those lines, because most of the time those lines are very, very hazy.
Yeah, that's true.
Like it's like the whole the meme from what's the movie? Is it The Notebook? I don't know. I've not seen it. When it's like, what do you want? Yeah. She's like, it's not that simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly. Coaching.
That's it. Yep.
If anyone comes to me now is like, I want to get into coaching, I'm going to send them, go watch The Notebook.
Yeah.
That's you'll learn about it. It's difficult.
Level 1. That's your level 1 course.
Yeah. We're going to have a seminar on The Notebook, and you need to go read psychology and sociology books. They'll be like, am I in the wrong class? It's like, well, maybe. Mate, I really, really appreciate your time. I'm not going to steal any more of it. I know you're a busy fella. So thank you very much.
Cool. Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thank you. If you're ever in this part of the world, hit me up. More than welcome.
Hopefully we'll be traveling soon. We'll see.
You got any travel plans when everything opens up?
Not right now. I mean, we want to go to Japan, and then I know we want to go back to Europe at some point. And we still haven't been to, we haven't really been to England, we haven't really been to the UK at all. So it'd be cool to do a full trip there.
If you go to Europe, I would recommend Croatia.
Oh, cool. Okay.
It's not it's not crazy expensive. It's more expensive in recent years because it's got a little bit touristy, but it's not crazy expensive. And it's absolutely stunning.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's cool. Yeah, we've been to Amsterdam and Czech Republic and Germany and the like, but we've never been that far east, like in Croatia.
Eastern Europe's amazing, man. Yeah, really good. Really good time.
Yeah,
cheap beer too. If you
yes,
you like your beer.
Yes, we've heard of that for sure.
Yeah, like 80 cents.
Oh wow, that's cheap. Yeah. We have in the Bay Area in California, we have $11 beer night. That's when it's on sale.
What?
Yeah, we're just at a restaurant the other day. I think it's like being usually between like $9 and $12 for a beer. Yeah.
Like
it's a different world. It's a different world here, for sure.
Fuck that. You just wouldn't drink.
Yeah, it keeps you sober.
It does keep you sober. I mean, that's a benefit, right? Like especially if you're trying to be an athlete at that time. It's nigh on impossible to be an athlete in Eastern Europe simply because the beer's cheaper than water.
Yeah, exactly right.
And it's golden too. It's like less of the filtered. It's not watered down. It's golden beer.
Yeah, in Prague we had some like the sort of like a what was it, Pilsner Urquell, but then they have another one called Kozel. It's like the dark beer.
Oh,
it's like super good. Yeah, but it's like all the beer we had there was it didn't have any of that. I don't know. I always thought it was like people were just like saying this, but it's different than what we get here. It just it was so much less like. It didn't make you feel bad the next day. Like I don't know how to describe it, but it was definitely different.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? It's the taste is different. The taste is better. Like it's it's not like super heavy, like you feel like you're drinking, but you're getting dehydrated, and then you're not hungover. Then if you obviously sink 15 pints, you're going to be hungover.
Yeah, but yeah, for sure, it's definitely a huge item on our list for sure.
Right. I would say it's probably the best thing about Europe, the beer and the history.
Okay. Yeah. I loved going around, like, Amsterdam's like super old, like you don't have anything like that here, especially out in California. Everything is like a strip mall or whatever.
Well, it's a relatively new place though, isn't it? America, like.
Yeah, right. Compared to Europe, I mean, for sure.
Yeah, like I mean, just my city alone, like I'm from Manchester, right? And it was founded in 79 AD.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And that's just the city, and it's mental.
Right. And there's built, that's cool. I love that stuff. I love traveling and history, and my wife and I are we got plans to do something where we travel for a bit for a few years, and hopefully we can make that all happen. We'll see. But
good, man.
Yeah.
Why not? Not? Awesome. Thank you very much.
Cool. I appreciate it. Yeah. No problem.
Have a good one, mate.